Allora, grazie mille di essere qui. It's such an exciting, quindi oggi parliamo un po' italiano, un po' in inglese, quindi George naturalmente is excited to be with us, is excited to speak Italian, but she asked for some patience and we're gonna give her a chance to switch between Italian and English so you can do the same. So George, thank you so much for being here. It's such an exciting afternoon. George yesterday composed for us an amazing concert based on the periodic table and dedicated to the memory of Nick Patruno, who was the former chair of the Transnational Italian Studies Department and also a distinguished scholar of Primo Levi. So I'm sure Nick is with us today. And George, thank you so much for having composed that piece for us and for accepting our invitation to speak with our fantastic students. So we are super excited, and also I may say a little moved because George studied with me, class of 2009. She studied with me intermediate.
Baby Italian.
Baby Italian. She studied with me elementary, and then she took, of course, a course on Primo Levi in English with Nick Patruno. So I remember those years very, very well. And since then, George has become really a faithful friend of the Italian department. So I hope, since many of you are about to graduate, I hope we can continue to stay in touch.
Yeah. I was just going to say, ricorda, Chiaka makes the cuss sound. That was my grand takeaway from Baby Italian.
That's fantastic. It's a fantastic takeaway. So a little bit, I'm going to introduce George formally, but then I'm going to give you a chance to say something about yourselves. Jessi, also known as George, so that's how I have been calling you since we met, is a Montana-born pageant sound-based freelance composer with a Bachelor of Art in Music from here, Bryn Mawr College, class 2009, and a Master in Art in Music Theory and Composition from the University of New Mexico in 2012. Their works are based in science and nature, integrating social curiosity, humor, and a love for knowledge. So we like that very much. Their music has been played across North and South America, as well as Europe through conferences and festivals such as the New Music Gathering and Montreal Contemporary Music Lab, commissions by LA Duo Strange Interlude and Karen Steven Dance, and residencies with the Denver Botanic Gardens and Open Air MT. Recent projects include the Diabelli Recomposed 50 new variations by women composers from 22 different countries, initiated by musicologist Claudia Vigos. So we look forward to hearing this new project. Since 2022, George has been part of the Emlyn Artist Collab, a collaboration with choreographer Gillian Wiltman, Open Air, the Musula Butterfly House and Insectarium, the University of Montana's Music Department, as well as the Emlet Evolutionary Biology Lab. The project brings to life the research done at the lab into curious and mysterious mating songs and dances of the Japanese rhinoceros beetle through the realms of music, dance, costume, and will be culminating in a final documentary. So how cool is that? So we're really looking forward. So what our conversation today, I would like now to let our students introduce themselves with a few sentences. Then each of them has prepared some questions for you. And again, the questions are in Italian, but feel free to answer in English and to jump between the two languages. And then also, besides the questions, we also have two presentations, one on anti-Semitism today, and then today, and then on Argento by two students. And of course, I would like to take this opportunity to also thank so much Giulio Genovese and Luca Zipoli for being with us today. After such a busy week, we had Wednesday night an amazing talk with the president, Nancy Vickers. She was your president, right?
Yeah.
She came to give a fantastic talk on Dante, then yesterday the concert, and today with George. So Giulio and Luca, grazie mille, sempre con noi. With that said, so let's introduce each other, including Giulio. Let's start with Renata. Renata.
I'm not idea presentarti, just because there is the recording.
Oh, I love that.
Sì, grazie, qui Renata. Just...
Il mio caffè qua. Allora, mi chiamo Renata, sono una studentessa del terzo anno e sono un major di informatica e sì, a me piace la musica tantissimo, a me piace suonare la musica e poi sono eccitata di parlare con te. Grazie. Grazie.
Why sit down?
Ciao, mi chiamo Ava, sono nel mio ultimo anno al Bryn Mawr e studio il Growth Structure Studies e Italia.
Grazie Ava. Monica?
Ciao, sono Monica, sono una studentessa di Haverford College e nel mio ultimo anno e sto studiando economia con una concentrazione in Latin American Studies. E non so come toccare o suonare strumenti, ma mi piace ascoltare. Sento felice di stare qui e conoscerti. Sì.
Grazie Monica.
Ciao. Mi chiamo Lake. Questo è il mio quarto anno qui a Bryn Mawr e tecnicamente io sono un super senior. Passo a questo punto 5 anni nel dipartimento di italiano. Yes. È stata un'esperienza indimenticabile, davvero. È molto ispirante a vedere un'alumna come te tornare qui per forse rivivere un po' la tua esperienza di Bryn Mawr e mi fa pensare che in forse 5, 10, 20 anni posso ritornare io e visitare i miei professori e il campus che mi ha dato una fondazione molto importante.
Sì. Grazie, Lake. Giulio, Luca, would you like also to introduce yourself, please?
Certo, parlare, Luca, sì.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Io sono Giulio, sono un visiting assistant professor qui a Bryn Mawr nel dipartimento di italiano e ho amato il concerto ieri sera, è stato veramente, veramente bello. Io ho studiato all'Università della Pennsylvania per il mio PhD e adesso sono qui e questo semestre insegno un corso di cinema e Lake è una mia studentessa, insegno anche Baby Italian e Ava è la mia TA quest'anno, molto contenti, e Lake è stata la mia TA 2 anni fa, quindi sono molto contento.
Ciao, benvenuta a Bryn Mawr College, mi chiamo Luca e sono alla fine del mio secondo anno qui a Bryn Mawr College dove insegno nel dipartimento di italiano. So suonare il pianoforte, ma non sono musicista, è amatoriale, però mi è piaciuto molto il concerto di ieri, è stato veramente un piacere. E niente, sono molto contento di sapere di più dalle studentesse e da te, insomma, di questo progetto. Quindi grazie.
Grazie. Sì, infatti prima delle presentazioni vorrei anche dire, appunto, per mettere una nota autobiografica, che mio nonno era un violinista, suonava al Teatro Verdi a Pisa e mia madre anche una pianista, mentre io ho provato poi in realtà a seguire quella strada ma con un clamoroso insuccesso, quindi però so apprezzare molto, quindi siamo pronte per iniziare. Allora iniziamo appunto con Lake, le domande di Lake. Lake, prego.
Quando stavi nel processo di comporre questo pezzo di musica, questo viaggio musicale, hai detto ieri che hai riletto il sistema periodico quante volte? 27 hai detto? Sì. Ti è venuta in mente l'idea di comporre qualcosa così, un pezzo ispirato dal libro anni fa, forse quando tu eri studentessa di Bryn Mawr, leggendo per la prima volta il sistema periodico, o dopo forse 5-10 letture hai pensato di fare qualcosa così? Qual è il processo?
So when did I first think of it?
Yeah.
Sì. È un progetto dedicato a Nick Patruno e Primo Levi. Io penso primo quando 2020 per la memoria. Io voglio fare qualcosa per Patruno perché lui è un professore molto speciale. È un primo corso ho prenduto con lui e ho letto il tablo periodico. Due uomini, there we go, sono connettivo. So when I basically was wanting to do the project, it kind of just was, voila. It's like let's write the piece to do the book, and mi piace molto I libri di Primo Levi, e in the process che scrivo il piece ho leggeto tutti I libri e essays tutti che Levi scrive. Luckily, at that time, the entire collection of Primo Levi's writings were just translated into English, so it's about 4,500 pages in 3 volumes. Ho letto tutti. Il biography of Levi. So, yeah.
Sì, grazie. La mia altra domanda... Oh, sì. Lo so che il pezzo è composto da tutte 21 capitoli del libro, un movimento per ogni capitolo, ma c'è un capitolo in particolare che è più speciale per te, specificamente nel processo di comporre?
Oh, buona domanda.
Esagerato.
Mi piace molto il capitolo Nitrogen. È un beautifully written chapter, a really amazing time where Primo Levi was just married, and it's a kind of just a very sweet story of frankly finding chicken shit. But it's, this wonderful bit of life. So I really, and it was one movement where I read it and I could hear it in my head before I started writing. It is Argon, like il primo capitolo, è molto speciale, ma ancora también molto difficile per scrivo, perché il primo movimento. So voglio fare perfetto. Cominciato questo movimento 2 anni fa. The piece was done. It was the first one I started, and I started it. The project started in 2020. I tried to write that movement in 2021, and I finished it in 2023. So I love that movement. And a fun fact is the Little Wiggly themes, for those who heard it up top, I literally spelled out every single name in his family, since that chapter is all about his naming the members of the Familia. I translated that into the notes, so it literally spells out the names of every single family member in that piece. So I like that little bit of it, and it actually comes back in gold when Primo gets captured and interrogated, and kind of at the end he has that moment where he claims his heritage, and it's a moment kind of pride, but also like who knows the future, and the names actually come back verbatim in the piano because he's claiming his heritage, he's claiming his family. So I brought the names back in gold and I wrote Argon. So yeah.
That makes so much sense, but at the same time, I would never think of it. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah. So those two, I really like those two.
Grazie.
Grazie Lenique. Monica.
Grazie.
Sì, per me era molto interessante imparare che tu hai fatto un concerto di un libro e come una traduzione del libro. E per me è molto interessante. E poi la mia prima domanda è come hai iniziato a comporre e recitare musica che riflette le discipline scientifiche.
Buona domanda. ieri io parlo con i composition class e tutti come questa domanda. A lot of ways. So let's see if I can do this in. Per esempio, I numeri the atomic numbers. I can't say that. Where is this? Okay. So I numeri atomici hanno giocato un ruolo importante nel compositore I movimenti. So I take the numbers and I factored them. So like, for example, zinc, and I'm just going to have to say this in English because I have no idea how I would say this in Italian. So in zinc, the atomic number is 30. So 30, if you factor it out, is 2, 3, and 5. And so in this chapter, it's all, again, it's a youthful chapter, and so I have, one of the themes I have is Levi's sense, Primo's sense of self. So I literally translated Primo's name into a nice little musical motif, and fascism, because fascism was starting to really affect his relationships with his classmates and anti-Semitic policies, and he was finding himself very isolated. So with the 2s, 3s, and 5s, they create my structure for every phrase. And it's very back and forth, and so even the time signatures for Levi, it's always in 3/4. For fascism, it's always like this very dissonant 2/4 march. And in almost every single movement, multiples of the atomic number are the actual length of the piece. So that's just like a fun numbers game. And then like Levi, the way he writes, like these elements are the characters of each chapter, and so it's really for me it was just like really trying to stay true to che Levi scrive, what Patruno's analysis of the piece was, because I kind of wrote this hand in hand, referencing the periodic table and also Patruno's understanding Primo Levi. So I could talk about that a long time, but that's like one example with the atomic numbers.
Grazie. La prossima domanda è come la sua musica con gli strumenti riflette la sua identità e esperienza.
Kind of like tutti. Non mi piace parlare molto, non mi sento che espressivo mio thoughts and ideas molto buono. Ma con musica senza palabra, I feel like I make myself understood more. As you can, kind of a funny story related to that is I played a piece for some of my students because I was teaching a class, and they were wondering what I wrote, and I played them a piece, and they went, "You seem so chill." You're not chill at all, because it was this really intense piece where that was very, very like it's twitchy. So it's musica is un miglior via per mia espressione.
Cool. E la mia ultima domanda è, oltre al sistema periodico, che altri progetti ha fatto? E c'è un follow-up, stai pianificando nuovi progetti?
Sì, dopo questo viaggio io vado al Montana, finisco il progetto di Rhinoceros Beetles e la premiere di questo pezzo è nel maggio, ma dopo that, non lo so. I've been working on these both for this one since 2020 and the Montana piece since 2022. So, con mio lavoro è super busy e quando faccio. But grazie.
Grazie.
Grazie mille Monica. Renata.
Ciao. Mi dispiace. Allora, sono anche un musicista un po', non sono così di comporre così, ma a me piace di suonare gli strumenti, anche di ascoltare la musica e parlo con persone della musica, ma sono curiosa della tua esperienza nella musica e come hai cresciuto di andare in questo posto. Allora, che tipi di musica ascoltavi o suonavi nella tua infanzia?
Ho ascoltato non molto classical music, ma mi amo hip hop. So even today non ascolto molte musica classical, ma ascolto sempre everything else, mostly because it messes with me when I compose. So I have to have really weird music. Though I have been going in preparation for this, I went down the Spotify rabbit hole of every Italian playlist I could find. Ma nella infanzia ancora ascolto folk. Mia madre ama Neil Young and 60s artists, Bob Dylan. So mie sorelle, Anna, the oldest one, ascolta punk. Mia altra sorella Vanessa ascolta pop e techno. So nella mia casa molte tipiche di music. So
questo sembra come la mia famiglia. Ma è così interessante perché come si inizia di fare la musica classica? Perché non how does one begin doing classical music? Because we don't really listen to it as kids.
Bellissimo Renata.
Nella mia classe musica in elementary, scuola elementary, mia professoressa played records. I think when she just didn't want to teach us, but she would play these musical records. Io ascolta un violino. It was like a light bulb, and I went, I want to do that. And quando fourth grade, io ho iniziato suonare il violino e discovered Bach, Beethoven, Mussorgsky, altri composers, and nel new musical world, and just kind of fell in love with it. So,
Che incredibile!
yeah.
Anche vorrei chiedere, cosa ti ha influenzato nella scelta di usare il sistema periodico come ispirazione per quest'opera?
Patruno. Yeah. I read those.
Parla per se stessi. Allora, questa era una domanda facile, ma poi vorrei chiedere quale musica ti ha influenzato di più? Perché stiamo parlando delle influenze, dell'inizia.
Il mio compositore preferito è Mussorgsky. Io amo come lui approaches il pianoforte. Se non ascolti pictures at an exhibition per solo pianoforte, it will blow your mind. It is such a hard piece to play. Most recordings are only for two hands, but I've heard one for a solo that was played by a soloist, and it's just amazing. La musica è molto appassionato, è fun, divertente, è felice, è tutti emozionale. It's just, it encompasses everything, and I loved the way he approaches music. So, Mussorgsky.
Sì, tutte le cose della musica classica che le persone dimenticano.
Mm-hmm.
Non pensano di quello, ma grazie mille.
Grazie Renata.
Grazie Renata.
E adesso Ava.
La prima domanda è: da dove nasce l'ispirazione musicale per te? Da una memoria, un episodio di attività?
Buona domanda. Mio childhood, we just saw
La
that.
mia infanzia.
There we go. Grazie. Grazie. Mia madre ama la musica. Allora, io e mie sorelle sempre had music on constantly. And io penso la musica just basically sank into my bones. And io molto piano, non parlo molto. Io leggo molto. musica permite io to feel things. So it was kind of my outlet as a very quiet person.
Quali emozioni specifiche ogni capitolo ti ha suscitato?
Suscitato? Suscitato?
Quale si dice in inglese?
Ispirare.
Sì.
Traduciamola questa domanda per
Sì, per
Giorgio,
favore.
per aiutarla.
What specific emotions in each chapter really do inspire?
Ogni capitolo è differente. Argon è memoria, a connection to the past and family. Hydrogen è molto appassionato, all the feelings you have as a kid, or like when you discover something cool and you're like, oh. Zinc emotionally become more complicated. And so ogni capitolo è differente, ma quando ho scritto io provo to capture the core feeling of each chapter. So when I was writing, I really did use Patruno's book, The Understanding Primo Levi, because it just distills each chapter in such a beautiful way, and it was like, okay, this is the core of what I'm going to. But there's a lot of rereading things. I think that's the best I can answer that one.
E ultima, come ne pensi che la traduzione delle opere scritte in formato musicale influenzi il significato del lavoro di esiste una buona traduzione?
Ava, can you translate?
Okay. How do you think that translating the written work into a musical format influences the significance of these work?
Oh no. Mia espera che it adds another layer to it. Forse quando someone legano il work to Levi and didn't maybe connect to it as much, or just doesn't know it and doesn't know the tradition it's written in. So music is always another way to expand people's awareness to works, and also kind of what I was really excited about last night was quite a lot of people that came up to me were like, I'm gonna go and read that book because I want to know what you were writing and what the story was behind each movement. So my other hope is because I do want to have a concert of this piece either every year or every other year, is that people who maybe don't know Primo Levi, who don't know the periodic table, hear the piece and go, let's read this book and see what it's about, because I think it's a super important book. It's super applicable to today's world still. It's a different way of I think it's a very different approach from a lot of the other works that were written about the Shoah and about from Holocaust survivors, and it was one of the reasons why I connected it too much because it's so much because it's and Patruno wrote about this is like it's deeply felt, but it's presented in a way that doesn't let its emotions get in the way of the story. And so I resonate very much to that. So yeah, I just kind of hope that my piece will have at least a little impact of getting people to read the book.
Grazie.
Grazie, Ama. Sì, lei che...
Ho un'altra domanda.
Benissimo, lei che ha un'altra domanda.
Tu hai tradotto un'opera letteraria alla musica, a un pezzo di musica. Pensi che sia possibile tradurre un pezzo di musica a un formato scritto?
Oh, see, I think that would be super cool. I don't know how that would go about, because again, I go the opposite direction of trying to just translate a lot of times data, because my music is so nerdy, is I'm always working with scientific data and trying to translate that into music and how to make it translate to music, as well as have it be the character of what I'm writing about. So for example, the Rhino Beetle piece, it is super data oriented, but I also wanted to capture the kind of derpy nature of the Rhino Beetles. So yeah, I think it would kind of be amazing if someone, let's say, took like the periodic table, the piece I wrote, and then wrote like, I don't know, poetry to it. Now, I'm not a writer, so I have no idea how it would go, but I think that would be like, it's the arts and language and music can kind of feed back and forth on twin others so much, and it's like, and same with visual arts, so you could kind of almost have like this endless cycle of like responses to things. So no, that's a really great question.
Grazie per rispondere.
Yeah, grazie.
Grazie, Lake. No, I just want, I don't have, I want to, and then Luke and Giulio, please feel free to ask questions or make comments. I was just very much struck by what you said about music substituting words. And, I was very much thinking that at the core of that observation, there is really the strength, the value of conversing with one each other, of dialoguing, right? And so this is very important for you. Now I'm learning that about you. And of course, it was very important for Levi. And this is not, the students were fantastic because this is not a course on Levi.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we have read, this not the systemic periodic entirely, but we have read a couple of elements. So it's very important for Levi as well, right? The fact that in whatever form each of us decides to express our thoughts, it always aims at conversing with others, right? And that's what Bryn Mawr Levi wants. He wants to converse with us. He wants us to continue to read his books, mostly in part to learn what happened, because we know that his writings are very important as an historical testimony, and in part also just to learn about him and life, and to answer all these questions the students did. So for me, what you're saying, that was very important. The music for you is a substitution of words, but it really, when the students say, "Oh wow," the comment was the adjective your students used when they heard your piece, and you say you're not chill at all, right? So it's we all express our personality using different kind of forms. For us, obviously, there are more words because we write. For some students, can be music, like and Renata were saying. Some others could be drawings or even economics, Monica. But it's really, I think, it's important. The conversation is important, really, in order to understand the others, but also to understand each other, and therefore to change, right? So when you were telling us that course on Primo Levi was transformational, that's what I meant, because it's transformational as a consequence of a dialogue. So I was very touched by what you said, that. And then I also wanted to say that, this interdisciplinarity of which, Monica, you also were talking about, right? Because it's a science book. It's a science, of course, Levi was a chemist. Of course, the periodic table, we all know what it means in chemistry, but that each element creates a story, and either autobiographical or historical. So it's really this perfect combination at the core of a liberal arts college, right? That students can really jump from one. Renata is majoring in computer science, there you go, and Monica in economics, and Ava. So Lake, you also minor in computer science. So it's really at the core of what we do. Again, it's a dialogue among disciplines, right? And of course, we know that for Patruno, dialogue was very important. So, I think I was really struck by how you put all of this together, and came back to us 10 years, more than 10 years later, 15 years later, still aiming at dialoguing with us. So, Lake, absolutely, to go back to what you were saying, you are welcome to come back. But we don't have to wait 15 years. It can be sooner. So I wanted to say that. Giulio and Luca, would you like to add something? And then we have the presentation.
Sure.
Non ci ho pensato,
No, I was wondering, because I'm always fascinated by the process of adaptations, adapting something to another medium in a different context. And so Lake was talking about going from literature to music and back, And so for this project of yours, I was wondering, what kind of elements did you adapt from going from a literary work, from Levi's work to your music? Are there some specific themes or structure or the style, or does it change?
Yes to everything. I'll kind of give a short summary of what I was talking about yesterday, but when I was working on the translation of this book, besides when I was reading, I was really trying to get, and the themes Levi had, the phrases he used. If I was kind of struck by, and I knew this was very important to him, but reading all of those books, how many times the phrase "bear witness" came up. And so I was kind of trying to pay attention to the phrasing of the words. And then with this book, I should have brought it with me, but I literally took notes on every single chapter and paid attention to, because Levi brings it's not just chemistry, but he brings literature in and references to different regions of Italy and all of that. So I took notes on things that really started sticking out to me. So like going back to zinc, Thomas Mann's Magic Mountain is super, super important. So thank you, JSTOR Alumni Access. As I looked up what music is included in Thomas Mann's Magic Mountain, well, Strauss's Der Winterweiss, Der Lindenbaum, is quoted in that book all over the place. So actually I quoted the piece from the book that Levi quoted in the movement. So that's like one example. Also in Argonne, besides spelling out the names of the Levi's family members, they're from the Piedmont region. He was talking about the Piedmont dialect. As I spelled out the word Piedmont and used that as the basis for my chordal progression. So it's that whole chapter is just his history and where he's from, just spelled out, and it I tried to capture like the misty quality he was talking about of like looking into the past and it becoming clear, coming present. And then later in the book in Arsenic, again, he's talking with this man with the Piedmontese dialect, and I brought back the same chordal pattern. So things like that are kind of what I'm working with, and like things that poke out to me. And then it's like within each chapter I was trying to kind of grasp, is the story the more important thing, or is the mood more important? So like in Nitrogen there's not like a whole lot of action, it's more the mood. So like I tried to find like I essentially made a Viennese waltz which followed that structure, but that movement is also all about recycling. So none of the musical material in there is actually original. I just took it and reconfigured it from other movements. So those are some of the ways that I tried to stay true to Levi's book, but translate it into a musical context.
That's very interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that goes back a little also to what Ava was saying, the translation in the broader term, not only from a language to another, but from a field to another. Just, like you were saying now, so from literature translation into music. And I was wondering also why this translation, just to follow up, I was wondering also why this translation, this adaptation, Giulio is a scholar of adaptation studies, happened only so far with your reading of the periodic table, because you must have read in a course dedicated to Levi, right? You must have read all Levi pretty much, right?
Yeah.
Because it was a monographic course on Levi, so out of all. And I'm sure you read also poetry. I'm sure you read also his many interviews and conversations, to go back to the meaning of conversation. So, but yet you decided to compose on that particular, to use the adaptation of that particular book of Levi, right?
Yeah. So it's the periodic table it's a very similar way to how I think, is it's very science based. It's very like data and referential based, like kind of when I'm writing, I'm always integrating, kind of like Levi's always quoting books and regions, as I do the same thing anyway in my writing. So it was a very kind of natural fit for just how I normally compose. So, and it's just like, it was the first book I read of Levi's, and it did. I just read it and went, holy crap, wow. Because it was way different than anything I'd ever read. And so I read everything, but kind of right from the start of this project it was going to be the periodic table. So, yeah.
Grazie Giulio.
Yeah. I do have a copy of the book on me if you'd like to reference it then.
Oh, great, thank you. I'm like, at this point, I probably should have it memorized.
First of all, thank you so much for giving us this insight into the project. I personally think that it's always so cool when you have an artist explaining you or giving you some background or insight into their works. So I think we are very, very privileged not only to have the concert, but also to have the opportunity to speak about it with you. So thank you so much for your time. So just, listening to the students' presentations and to your responses, I was just thinking that Primo Levi's language is very musical. So Primo Levi, in his style, of course, was very much concerned with the topic, with the theme that he was conveying, as Roberta was saying. There is this urgency to say what happened, so the content, but also was striving to say it in the best way possible. If this is a man, se questo uomo starts with a poem. Mm-hmm. So, the importance of the word, so of the language, to find the right way to say things. And I think personally that Primo Levi is one of the best narrator in Italian literature, not only, of course, for the importance of the topic, but also for his language. So I'm always struck by some elements in his language, like the rhythm, the pace, and I always see that he's using almost like formula. He's very scientific, very chemical, very rational in his language. There is one way to express, and he was very essential, very scientific, and sometimes you can read, the same meaning, the same concept expressed in one way throughout his career. That is very fascinating. And some phrases that he uses in Se questo uomo, he will use it in I Sommersi Salvati, in exactly the same words, just to say that I think he was reasoning in that way, finding the best way, the most musical way, musical meaning, the phonic way, the best, linguistic way to express. And even, I worked a bit on Levi's personal writing. I mean, like letters, so writings not for publications. And you can see that, he was writing in the same style. So my question is that just, if in your work you were inspired not only, of course, by the topic, the themes of each of the short stories from the periodic table, but also, I don't know, if you were inspired by the language, by the style, by the rhythm that Primo Levi is using in Sistema Periodico or in the poems, or generally what you think about that as a musician?
Yeah, no, that's an amazing question. No, and succinctly, yes, absolutely. Like the way he writes is so gorgeous. It is musical to the hilt. It's what made this piece actually very hard to compose, because it was like I wanted to find the right way of expressing things. It's why it took me like a year and a half just to write the first movement. I actually wish I had another like 6 weeks to write the last movement, and I just didn't have time. So I did the last movement, and I'm like, I may just rewrite you at some point. But there were a few times where it's like I couldn't grasp the movement. Like Silver, I had a hard time with. And I actually had to just set it aside because I wasn't capturing how I wanted, how it felt when I read it, and I wasn't capturing the language of it. So I actually had to go and do something else. And I did that with actually quite a few movements, as I had to, actually most of it I kept on going back and forth and back and forth. And like throughout the whole process, because chemistry is a big musical theme that keeps coming back because it's such a core idea to like his identity. So actually like movement to like chapter 2 is, chemistry is introduced. It comes back in chapter 3 in a fragment, comes back in chapter 5, and I've expanded it because Levi's matured and he's now in school rather than just experimenting. And so actually, like, I thought really carefully about like how the themes develop and are still recognizable for like, so it was this constant kind of going back and forth and being like, well, this was how it was said or phrased before. How can I keep true to that phrasing but like modify it? So yeah, I really, when I was reading and rereading and rereading and reading other of Levi's writings, I was paying a lot of attention to that language and his flow, so I could kind of grasp and make sure that I was kind of staying true to how I heard it in my head. But no, that's a really good question.
Both in Italian and in English, I imagine, since you can read both.
I need to go back. I would love to read everything in Italian, but for succinctness, I mostly just read it in English.
But the translation is amazing. I would say that Primo Levi is one of the best translated authors in English. I mean, the edition that I don't remember which presentation showed this, amazing translators. So.
Yes. So yeah, I was so lucky that had come out like before I was going through it all, because that was so helpful and just like. Yeah, the translations were really good. But yeah, my goal is someday is to read everything, but in Italian. But we're still at like ordering gelato, unfortunately, as far as talking goes.
Thank you so much.
That
was very interesting.
It was a great question, Luca's question, and it reminded me so much about how Levi himself really fought all his life to encourage us to look at his language as well. So he never wanted to be boxed into, like I was saying yesterday at the presentation, into a witness writer. Yes, I am that for sure. I'm an Holocaust survivor, and I am that, and I want you to read me for that. But I'm also a writer. I'm not a journalist. I'm also a writer, and I want to play with language, and I want to have the right to fictionalize the elements of the periodic tables, the characters I have met, what Nicholas Patruno called I personaggi ambigeni, because they were historical characters and not. So it's a great question, Luca, that you would appreciate a lot that question, the fact that you brought our attention to his language as a poet, as an author, as a literary author.
And he says that he was writing poetry throughout his life.
Absolutely.
So, the prose and the poetry writing really coexist throughout the career.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
And he said, I may go back to write, even when I write about the Holocaust, usually in 20th century at the beginning, right after World War II, at the end of the 20th century, literally those writers who were very, and I'm telling that to the students, those writers who were very involved with political ideology and commitment and anti-fascism, they were writers, so-called neorealist writers. So they were, like Vittorini and Pratolini, they were writers who were not much thinking about the language. The language is just a means for me to tell you that fascism was a horrible thing. But Levi wasn't in that category. Levi was really emerging as an author who had a more complex literary way of communicating. So Luca,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Grazie.
and without being like formalistico, I
Exactly.
mean, with such an essential language. I mean, that's why, it's always such an experience, as you said, to read Levi, both in Italian, but also I would say in English, because, yes, always committing to essentiality, not to an elaborate style, but which is a style of its own.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so... Thank you so much.
Grazie. Okay, so we can finish now the periodic table with a presentation by Nate, and then we will conclude our conversation with a more general presentation on Levi by Ava on antisemitism. Ok.
Ok, io faccio una piccola presentazione sul capitolo Argento. Tu hai menzionato le difficoltà di tradurre Argento alla tua opera. Quindi se a qualsiasi punto hai qualcosa da dire o di aggiungere, feel free to jump in or at the end I have questions. Ok. Lo scopo di questo capitolo, nella mia opinione, è di presentare un scopo superficiale di questo è una storia di un'esperienza di mio amico. Attraverso questa storia, questa esperienza, questo racconto, c'è davvero una storia di chimica. La chimica è lo scopo. Ma infatti è l'inverso, perché il racconto usa i mezzi della chimica per trasmettere al pubblico questo messaggio dell'esperienza umana e di cose a cui ognuno di noi può relate?
Sì, con cui ognuno di noi può identificarsi.
Grazie. Sì, c'è un livello superficiale e un livello più profondo.
Faccio io.
Grazie.
Dimmi te quando devo cambiare.
Ok. Ci sono 3 concetti centrali al racconto che ho identificato. Il primo, il regime rigoroso di perfezione. Come vediamo o come invece leggiamo, ci sono limiti del mandato e di provare a avere controllo sopra tutto. Forse ci sono buone intenzioni o non so, o forte sforzo di prendere quel controllo, ma in ogni caso ci sono circostanze imprevedibili. E Levi anche menziona che ci sono regole e restrizioni che non hanno senso. Quando si preoccupa troppo con tutto deve essere perfetto, tutto deve essere in linea o ci sarà un disastro. Quindi tu metti questi ordini di le tute si devono lavare ogni giorno in questo fiume e non si non so non in questo caso ma in altri casi non si mangia in questa zona, non si portano le scarpe in questa stanza. E alcune di queste regole non hanno senso e solo mettono più limiti alla esperienza dei lavoratori o dei studenti o delle persone nel vicino. Sì. E anche c'è un senso di ironia in questo racconto. Dicono, ok, dobbiamo lavare le tute ogni giorno per minimizzare il rischio di contaminazione. E a causa di lavare le tute in questo fiume contaminato, portano la contaminazione dentro la fabbrica. Quindi nonostante le intenzioni o gli sforzi, c'è tuttavia questa caos, un'altra forza incontrollabile. C'è una citazione. Accanto a 5 precetti o divieti sensati se ne annidano 10 insensati, inutili, che nessuno sa cancellare solo per pigrizia mentale, per scaramanzia o per morbosa paura di punizioni. La lotta di superare i risultati, questo high standard che accettano, perché lui è il caporeparto, lui ha questa responsabilità. Se c'è un problema come la contaminazione, è la sua responsabilità, perché lui ha questa posizione elevata, o lui anche ha il più da perdere, perché è in un senso un minorità, è il solo italiano in questa fabbrica piena di tedeschi. C'è giudizia e ci sono aspettative, e lui deve lavorare anche più duro degli altri per provarsi. Sì. È un'altra citazione. Qualcun altro vuole leggerla? Mi sento strano leggendo tutto me stesso. Sì, Luca, grazie.
Se non vuole qualcun altro.
Mi sentivo innocente, ma non ero. Ero colpevole per definizione, perché un caporeparto risponde del suo reparto, e perché se c'è danno c'è peccato, e se c'è peccato c'è un peccatore.
Grazie.
Che bella questa citazione.
Sì. Quindi c'è questo messaggio di avere questa responsabilità e questa colpa non meritata, solo a causa di essere un tipo di straniero.
Giro tenete.
Sì, grazie. Sì, la parte finale, la mentalità di un chimico, che leggiamo qui nel contesto di Cerrano, ma anche si può tradurre con Primo Levi stesso. Cioè, certo, una professionalità e un technical know-how sa fare il chimico, sa fare questi test per investigare il problema di contaminazione, ma anche ha alcuni aspetti più interni, come la perseveranza. Lui ha questa
Pesantezza.
Una responsabilità che
pesante,
sì, una responsabilità pesante, e non c'è nessuna ragione evidente per questo disastro, per cui di nuovo lui è colpevole. C'è questo dubbio e pressione, ma nonostante tutto questo lui continua a investigare, perché non ha nessuna scelta. Lui deve investigare, e alla fine, ascoltando gli altri pescatori, lui trova la risposta, la soluzione. A parte del pescatore, nessuno davvero gli aiuta. Lui deve fare tutto se stesso. All'inizio del capitolo c'è questa citazione da quando Levi parla con Cerano, e Levi dice: voglio scrivere un libro con racconti nel contesto della chimica, che mostrerà al pubblico come viviamo, come lavoriamo, e come a volte c'è buio e il lavoro è duro, ma dopo di fare tutto questo duro lavoro c'è luce e c'è speranza e c'è una soluzione e va bene. Hai un racconto così e Cerano dice: per me è tutto buio. Sì, lavoriamo e cerchiamo una soluzione, ma dopo di fare tutto questo lavoro e di assumere tutto questo rischio e pregiudizio e incomodità, c'è ancora buio e noi ci sentiamo più piccoli e più deboli, ma per qualunque ragione continuiamo.
Sì.
Potremmo leggere anche l'ultima citazione che ci aiuta proprio come passaggio a quello che poi Ava avrà da dire. Ava, Renata o Monica? Ava, dai.
In generale era proprio pur sempre. Il valore non si vedeva, si
Chiava?
il capo più e più volte contro il soffitto sempre più basso, e si finiva con uscire dalla grotta carboni e a ritroso, un po' più vecchi di quando ci si era entrati.
Grazie. Sì. Questo è tutto che io ho da dire, ma voglio sentire da te. Cosa ne pensi del capitolo, del ruolo dell'argento nel libro intero, e come hai provato a tradurre e come hai alla fine tradotto questo capitolo alla tua opera?
Lei che puoi provare a fare la domanda in inglese?
Oh yeah.
I got most of it, but yeah, just in case.
Yeah. So what did you think of this? Like either the first time you read it, the last time you read it, in between? How do you think it plays a role, like among the other chapters? And how did you said that you had some struggles like adapting this piece in particular, or this chapter in particular to your piece. Can you elaborate on that and maybe say like how you eventually found a way to do it, or what you settled on maybe?
Yeah, so this one is tricky, kind of for the reasons you're touching on in your discussion and your interpretation, because you can go, and with a lot of these chapters, you can go really deep on it. It's like, on surface level, it's just like here's a guy and his job, and I tell the story about the job, and let's reminisce about the past, and all of that. And it's like surface level, pretty straightforward. And then you kind of dig in, and you kind of see like, oh, like here's a commonality, and here's something you can translate to the more universal, like just like I am the other, I am feeling responsibility for something that is not my fault, and I like he talks about it in the chapter, the weight coming down on him, and like just like I forget the exact phrase, but it's basically like nails on a chalkboard. So there's like that story, like the pressure was heavier and heavier in there, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, exactly. It's something exactly like original sin. You haven't done anything, but you're guilty and you must pay. So it's like you get that, and that's like again, it's more universal. It's the two people who, you know, Levi didn't feel a lot of kinship with them, and so you're establishing this kinship, and so you can go really deep.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's also just like looking back on youth and establishing a commonality. So there's so many things you can do in this chapter. It was and really it also like came down to like also Levi's ability to be open to other people's stories. He had this amazing gift of listening, which comes out like throughout this book, of like in Nickel when he's in the mine, and like all these people he's like, it's like I was a great listener, so he learned all these people's stories. So it's his ability to listen. So it's like there were so many themes in here. It was really hard to kind of suss out like what's the one that really brings it home for me in terms of like coming to the core of it. And I think where I came to is like also this chapter, like Primo is feeling a little lost in his identity between I am a chemist and I am a writer and I am bearing witness, and it's a little bit wandering, and the chapter in itself kind of wanders through all of these themes. So I started out in kind of one way where I was trying to be more of the plot line, and it just didn't work. It was kind of too sectional and weird. And then I tried to do it as kind of more related to the previous story chapters and evoking kind of this ability to tell stories, and that didn't work. But what really stuck with me is like this wandering nature of the chapter. So I just started tweaking things, and there's very familiar themes, but whereas before the accompaniment is very static and chordal, I made the lines much more moving on top of the plot, so it captures that searching quality I was going for. So it's a hard. There's so much going on, and it was hard for me to kind of figure out like which aspect I wanted to bring out in it. And for me, it was that searching quality that also kind of continues in the next chapter in Vanadium, because again, he's searching for answers and how to respond to this person in letters, writing the multiple layers of like communication of just the personal and the professional. And so yeah, we went with wandering in this one. So it has all the themes that I was working with, but it's a little bit more lost as we're kind of seeking this answer, and we kind of get the answer in Carbon is, we're transferring from I am a chemist who writes on the side to I am a writer by chemistry. So we kind of get that flip again that you brought out in the beginning. So no, that was wonderful.
Thank you for your answers.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Grazie, che bella conversazione. So with this, I think with Lake, we wrapped up our more specific conversation of il sistema periodico, and with Ava, we opened the conversation more to Levi and his experience with during World War II, the Russian laws, Auschwitz, the concentration camps, and anti-Semitism. So, Ava, please.
I don't think I appreciated until the last time I read it that he's not that close to Chuck. And then they share this story, and at the end, he feels moved to and touched because I think now he does feel that kinship. He feels
They
like he's a little
been
less
through
alone.
the
Maybe.
ringer. Yeah, it's the kinship of those who've done the same work and been through that they search for answers and just like, what is this problem?
Quando vuoi che io cambio.
Ok. Ok. La mia presentazione dell'antisemitismo in Italia, let me know if I'm going to English or anything. Ma, ok, poi andare alla prossima slide, scusa, c'è molto slides, scusi. Prima vorrei iniziare con la storia degli ebrei in Italia e antisemitismo.
C'era.
Ok.
Non so.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I know, you're like,
Yeah.
natural.
Look at me.
Ah, ok. So primo nella storia ho due parti, o molto parti, la prima è l'antichità. Il primo storicamente gli ebrei sono presenti dal il secondo secolo a.C., ma durante questo tempo c'è molta fluttuazione con il loro trattamento. Alcune volte nessuno molto accettato, ma in alcuni tempi non molto accettato. Dopo il cristianesimo molti fuggirono all'Italia perché c'è un nuovo tipo, ma in generale ho pensato che i sentimenti degli ebrei erano molto apati delle persone italiane durante questo tempo. Durante il Medioevo era molto diverso. Il Medioevo è un tempo molto strano in generale, ma c'è molto esperienze con esplosione, sinagoghe trasformate in chiese, battesimi forzati, conversioni forzati e in generale gli ebrei non accettano dai papi durante questo tempo. Ecco con alcune foto. Il primo è da un'ispezione di un raid di un tempio a Gerusalemme e le persone hanno rubato treasures?
Tesori.
Tesori degli ebrei come era un minore che loro hanno rubato. E ecco è un dipinto durante il Medioevo, e questa è una depizione del rito del sangue, qual era una credenza che gli ebrei furono forzati conversioni del cristianesimo all'ebraicano. Era un foto molto grafico, ma mostra alcuni dei sentimenti durante questo tempo. Anche una cosa molto interessante del trattamento degli ebrei era il ghetti ebraici, in particolare in Venezia, i ghetti veneziani. Questa era una legge in Venezia il 29 marzo 1516, scusi. E gli ebrei furono costretti a vivere in queste zone in Venezia, come il nord e
dopo ho alcune foto di questo. Ecco la piazza delle ghetti ebrei in Venezia. Ecco è un memoriale del vittime dell'Olocausto veneziano. Ecco io all'un sinagoghe.
Questo era durante il tuo study abroad?
No, prima ho 16 anni in questa foto. Sì, la mia mamma ha fatto questa foto. Ok, adesso abbiamo il fascismo e Mussolini. Ovviamente questo è un tempo molto male per gli ebrei tutto il giorno, ma interessante, prima dell'influenza di Hitler Mussolini no era antisemitico, secondo lui, non penso vero, secondo me, ma una cosa che ho pensato interessantissima è lui identificato come sionista. Lui era sopravvivendo il stato di ebrei nel Medio Est, adesso è Israele, ma questo era il suo credenza prima, questo era uno stato, è molto interessante. E anche un'altra cosa molto interessante, all'inizio molti ebrei sostenevano Mussolini e il fascismo, prima e la seconda guerra mondiale, ovviamente questo è un cambiamento, ma lui ha molto supporto degli ebrei durante la prima guerra mondiale. Poi furono le leggi razziali contro gli ebrei e gli africani il 18 settembre 1938. Levi ha scritto di alcune del potassio, forse c'è più, ma potassio è solo che ho un po' ricordato. E poi l'italiano entrò in guerra nel 1940 e poi gli ebrei italiani andarono nei campi dopo il settembre 1943 e poi abbiamo i lettori di Levi di questi anni e dopo questi anni. E dopo la guerra c'è alcune voci importanti ebraiche della situazione. La prossima. Oh, scusi, questo è il foto. Questo è un articolo delle leggi razziali. Ecco un articolo, ma è propaganda antisemitismo. Ecco il deportation dall'Italia, quindi gli italiani andavano ad Auschwitz, poi Mussolini nel marzo di Roma. Ok, poi abbiamo la voce importante. Ok, c'è molto letteratura famosa ebraica, Natalia Ginsburg, Primo Levi, che conosciamo, anche Giorgio Bassani. E per parlare un po' di Primo Levi, vorrei parlare della ricezione di Levi dopo la guerra. Levi era una voce importante e ha parlato di temi molto difficoltà e profondi come la trama, l'umanità e l'accettazione di questa situazione difficoltissima. Ecco sono esempi del libro Se questo è un uomo, e la storia del lager, la tregua e il suo viaggio il campo all'Italia. I sommersi salvati è il mio preferito libro di Levi. Questa è un'impressione di saggi corto, di molto diversi topici, per esempio la zona grigia è uno molto famoso e che parla perché in questa situazione non c'è un'umanità lo stesso, è una situazione completamente diversa dalla guerra reale, la realtà. Lui parla di ecco. E poi ovviamente il sistema periodico, qual è secondo me un'interpretazione più artistica, più creatività e unico della sua vita, sua esperienza, gli altri sono più scientifica e storicamente.
Sì, mi è venuta a mente una cosa.
Sì, scusi, ho fatto molti. Ok, ecco è una citazione di lavoro di Levi. Chi vuole?
Sì. Per quanto riguarda la vita quotidiana, la vita in lager, i libri di Primo Levi sono diventati, negli anni, una traccia della memoria molto importante, anche per lo stile scientifico con cui Levi seppe descrivere le reazioni psicofisiche dei deportati, lo stile di vita dei lager, lavori forzati, la tragedia della Shoah nei suoi elementi più quotidiani. È questo di Raffaele Albicio e lui ha scritto un articolo del come Levi parla del trauma e gli aspetti psicologici della sua lavoro. Ok, adesso per parlare di antisemitismo oggi, in generale in Italia antisemitismo non è violento. Questo non è molto vero negli Stati Uniti, c'è più violenza come pistola adesso, ma questo non è un problema in Italia fortunatamente. In generale è un forma di stereotipi e vandalismi. Ma anche come adesso il conflitto con Israele e Palestina aveva antisemitismo, tutti i libri sono cattivi a causa delle azioni politiche e c'è un nuovo tipo di una generazione. Questa è una citazione, one Italian out of 3 think Jews are unpleasant people, while one Italian out of 4 does not consider them fully Italian. Quindi nell'Italia non molte persone sono molto accettazione degli ebrei e questo è con i dati e il numero di incidenti antisemiti a Italia.
Interessante questo,
Sì.
poi ne parliamo nella discussione.
Sì, molto. E l'ultimo slide, più dopo la guerra adesso, dopo la guerra ci sono più credenze antisemite. Una citazione, 15.6 degli italiani nega l'olocausto, mentre in 2004 era 2.6%. Inoltre, secondo il 23.9 degli italiani, gli ebrei controllano il potere economico e finanziario e secondo più di un quinto degli italiani intervistati, 22.2 controllano i media. Trova terreno fertile anche la tesi secondo cui gli ebrei hanno determinato le scelte politiche americane e di accordo è il 26.4. E questi numeri da il novembre scorso e la guerra a iniziare all'ottobre scorso. Quindi secondo me il credenze e la rabbia della situazione. Poi ho domande di discussione. Sì. Ok, come possiamo imparare dal passato, in particolare oggi con la guerra Israele-Hamas? E le voci di Levi e interrogazioni sono importanti perché continuare a leggere questi testi.
La prima domanda mi ricorda molto la domanda di Lake durante il talk che abbiamo avuto con il professor Marti Marafiotti sulla peste, sul contagio e quindi su ovviamente la peste nel Boccaccio, nel Manzoni, ma poi abbiamo iniziato a parlare di Covid-19, abbiamo parlato degli anni 80 dell'AIDS e lei che mi ricorda hai fatto esattamente questa domanda al professor Marafiotti, ma insomma, ma cosa abbiamo imparato dalla storia? Quindi innanzitutto abbiamo imparato e se abbiamo imparato, che cosa abbiamo imparato? Quindi una domanda difficile, ovviamente do spazio a voi, soffermiamoci adesso su questa prima domanda. Perché mi ricordo poi lei che tu hai fatto questa domanda a Marti Marafiotti e poi we had a talk a few weeks ago dedicated to the plague. So we spoke about Boccaccio, but then we spoke about Manzoni's Promessi Sposi, and then our guest speaker spoke about the continuities with more recent viruses such as COVID-19, but also he made a lot of reference to the AIDS in the 80s. Mm-hmm. And I remember Lake asked the question, but we did with a certain level of frustration, rightly so, but we haven't learned anything. And she, and you were right, they were right. it seems like we are not learning. Are we? Like,
Io penso che una cosa che si può imparare da questa situazione, non so se abbiamo imparato, ma una cosa è che il stigma o la stigma?
lo stigma.
Grazie. Lo stigma è la opinione pubblica di questi gruppi marginalizzati come gli ebrei o gli omosessuali, eccetera, viene non dalla realtà o dalla loro cultura o stile di vita, viene dalla posizione sociale in cui noi li mettiamo. Viene da circostanze fuori dal loro controllo. Noi designiamo questa situazione, questa posizione sociale per poter anche meglio marginalizzarli. Avere questo controllo politico, culturale, sociale sotto loro, credo.
Great answer.
Now, can you summarize that?
Like,
I think that something we can learn from this is a lot of public stigma and like judgment and stereotypes don't necessarily come from how those stigmatized groups really act or live, like anything in reality. It comes from the position that the larger public or the ruling class puts them in. Like, there was already, of course, like stigma about like Jewish people, but then Hitler and Mussolini started saying they're so bad, we have to send them to camps and kill them. And then everyone hears that, and even people that probably weren't that anti-Semitic before the Holocaust starts thinking, oh, the guy in charge is doing this. He's saying that they're so bad that this has to happen. Well, they must be bad, so I'm going to treat them worse, and then everyone's going to see me treating them worse. And it's all, like, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy led by the people in power.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, no, in reading about this and similar frustrations of just like, you know, why continue to read their testimonies and all of that is because human beings as a collective, not individual, but as a collective, human beings are kind of dumb. And you do get, and especially I think these days with the internet and like you can get lost in an echo chamber where you click on one thing and it's like, then you get all the same things. And then it's just a reinforcing feed where you're just like, oh, everyone must think this. And the reality is, you know, you could be just talking to an algorithm. They did like this study on like Instagram where they actually like these people who had thousands upon thousands and thousands of followers who were like posting every day and they thought they were so successful. They removed all of their fake robot accounts from their subscribers and they had like 40 actual people following them. So it's really frustrating. So because you do just get stuck in these like, oh yeah, these kind of self-fulfilling, oh yeah, everyone's doing it, but the reality is so much different than what you're being told over and over. And so again, it's kind of like for me, kind of continuing to read these books and keep revisiting these things is no, it happened. I don't like it is to continue to reinforce this idea of bearing witness and hearing like this testimony of factual events and trying to get your own echo chamber of this is the truth, like a truthful spreading of information, which is very hard to do. It's kind of like beating your head against the wall. And, one of the reasons, like, for me that I'm doing the Rhino Beetle project, and like one of the, it sounds really stupid because it's like, it's about bugs having sex or trying to have sex. But one of the things that I was talking to the scientist who's leading this research, Doug Emlin, is he's so passionate about like trying to get into people's heads, and like that science got such a bad rep, especially during like COVID-19, is now people got very anti-science, all science. And so he was so excited about the project because music is another way of getting people back into being excited about science. And so, with music or the arts or poetry or whatever, it's a way of, getting facts and fighting that disinformation or the stereotypes about science or marginalized communities or cultures or whatever. So, but yeah, it's a conundrum.
Are there any comments on that?
Sto pensando quello che lei ha detto, che ci sono tanti modi in cui questi sistemi continuano, e penso che non sia solamente it isn't only in like once people are put in that position where they have that thought of, people are saying that this group is bad, then they must be bad. One other tool that I feel like kind of pushes that forward is that the larger group always puts labels on the oppressed group, kind of like blaming them for things that they have done. E sto pensando di questo fenomeno perché è così strano che succede volte e volte ancora. Vediamo che nella presentazione, they say that Jewish people, control everything, control the finances, which is ridiculous because, of course they don't. You're talking about, this is the group that is committing this act. They are the ones that control the economic system. And so to throw this blame on this group is kind of ridiculous. But it's also another way that once people feel like they're part of that bigger group and they're fighting against this, in reality, oppressed group, they start assigning the things that they have guilt for onto this group. And nel processo di quello, they kind of like absolve themselves of that guilt. It's okay.
We go back to Freud, right? Yeah, projection. Renata.
È così strana, ogni volta che parliamo di quello sto pensando della modo in cui queste azioni possono continuare, perché it offends sensibility when we look back on it, but people feel like they're being logical at the moment. It's like, how does that happen?
I'm thinking of like peer pressure,
Mm-hmm.
almost. Like I remember at like the very beginning, like when the war like broke out, you would see like on social media a lot of like maybe like anti-Semitic posts from people, and then I think they like realized like maybe that was a little too far. Like I don't see that anymore, but at the very beginning I would, and I was like, I don't think these people are actually anti-Semitic. I think they're just seeing everyone else post these things and like having these kind of same beliefs that like, oh, well the Jews are evil, I don't know, but things like that. You kind of have to like really separate, like, it's not the Jews and the Israelis who are evil, it's like the government, and also on the other side, like it's the governments that are doing this, and then all the people are being affected. Like even the Israeli people hate it. So they don't like what's going on either. No one likes it. You just have to really separate the two.
Yeah, it's hard to parse information these days. And again, it takes a lot of work anymore to parse information, and there's very few easily found sources of like, actually this is what's happening. And like there's a lot of studies that come out in terms of like, speaking of levying, the precision of language, just that in certain incidents they'll say victim or like ages this to this were this many ages this to this, but just say like people like use a very neutral personal pronoun, whereas like if they're wanting to evoke sympathy, then they'll say children, or like they'll the way language is used is very weird in the news, and you have to really pay attention to even how things are phrased to figure out what is the angle of the of who's writing it, because so many of the so much press now is just owned by corporations with their own interests. So it's like, okay, read carefully.
And if I can just quickly add on to that, I think a lot of people get tricked by seeing like news sites and social media posts that seem really neutral, and because they're not saying like flat out in as many words, Jews are bad, but the wording that they use more generous language when they're maybe talking about one side of a conflict, or they say like, oh, children were killed here. Whereas if they're talking about the other side, they might be saying like, yeah, people this to this age had this % mortality rate, instead of saying like thousands and thousands of children. Like, you're right, they use this manipulative language, and even if it seems like at first glance like a fair assessment of what's going on, they aren't using any hate speech, like they're still saying something. They want you to believe a narrative. They're not giving you the facts.
So,
Infatti, the propaganda that is extremely explicit kind of helps their goal eventually, perché queste persone possono dire, oh, non sono come quello, I'm not anti-Semitic, I wouldn't say something that clear. That also absolves their own guilt in a way. And so it's tutti queste parti funzionano, we work together.
Yeah, and in Italy is happening exactly the same thing. We have a government. Some of them are very explicitly racist, but some of them, to go back to your observation, they are very superficially neutral, but yet they're homophobic, xenophobic, misogynist. But if you don't have the critical skills to dig down, they seem. For instance, in Italy, there was this very public case a few days ago of a northern public school. It was not a high school, it was, I think, an elementary school, whose principal decided to close the school for Ramadan. And then everybody started criticizing that. And the politicians in our government, which is a very right-wing government, instead of directly saying how racist they are, they started saying, we accept Ramadan, we accept religious freedom, we accept the plurality of religions in this country, but we won't allow the school to close for non-Catholic holidays. So the preface sounded so good, right? So, and then, by the end, they concluded the reasoning, for some people, but, if they're not racist, then it's good to criticize. So it's some of them are more explicitly racist, but some of them, I heard Daniela Santaché, for example, she started sounding so democratic, and then she ended, it's wrong, Ramadan is wrong, because they're not.
Also, when they try to seem not, xenophobic and all of that, the language that they use, you were mentioning, we accept, we accept, but also the notion of accepting, it's problematic, because you don't have to accept anything, everyone is free to practice any religion, of course, and so even when they want to sound, to play with words,
absolutely,
it comes out as it is.
You're right, and it would, like when they're saying, we welcome non-Italians in Italy. Yeah, of course, Italy it's a country, people can arrive. You're right. So that it's. And then, of course, there are more explicit, when Trump was defining COVID the Chinese virus. And that, of course, was. So I think that, there is so much more to say. And I'm sure, as Bryn Mawr College students, Haverford students, alumni, faculty, we could stay here the rest of the afternoon to talk about these very dear values for us. They're very dear values. But I'm sure that George is tired, and I really would like to take this once again, this opportunity to thank you so much. It has been a fantastic opportunity to have you on campus as a composer, as an alumna, as a reader, as one of us. So it has been a very special conversation, since we value very much the notion of conversation. And thank you to the students, and of course to Giulio and Luca. So grazie, George.
And listening to my bad Italian attempts.
It wasn't bad at all.
I've been working. I keep working. I keep trying. But no, thank you so much. It's been amazing being back here, and I am so happy that I was able to have the premiere here. So I'm just delighted, and thank you for all your help
and for the conversation today too, because like Luca was saying earlier, it's so interesting to you see a piece of art, and then you talk with the artist about the process of creation. So that to have you here with us, it was an extra gift for us.
Good.
Thank you.
Grazie a tutti, grazie.